Hello, everyone. This is Richard Avery again, and today I chose for my video presentation to speak about the technology behind the evolution of autonomous vehicles, or better yet, known as self driving cars. Now, when we think about the automobile, I can recall my grandfather, and I heard stories of my great grandfather who drove vehicles that were classified as a horseless carriage. In a span of less than 70 years, we've went from the horseless steam powered carriage to high powered vehicles. Vehicles with a great deal of horsepower and torque and high power. In our discussion today, when I consider self-driving cars, the first thing that comes to my mind is we are looking at a concept that was birthed in science fiction. Now, this concept involved futuristic elements, plots in the story, and to make the story interesting, with science fiction writers such as Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and others would do, they would talk a lot about what the world or their vision of the world looked like hundreds or perhaps thousands of years in the future. And it always involves some type of conveyance that was able to operate without the intervention of a human being. In the story of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, written by Jules Verne in the year 1870. He wrote about, in his novel, a submarine, or he didn't call it a submarine, but it was an underwater craft that was able to operate underwater, and it was named the Nautilus. It's interesting to note that Jules Verne wrote this story in 1870. However, in 1954, the United States Navy developed the first nuclear-powered submarine. And appropriately, and probably commemoratively, they named it after Jules Verne's Nautilus in his story. Now, let's take this subject into a different tangent. When we talk about self-driving vehicles, the first thing that comes to people's mind is, oh my goodness, I'll be able to travel, I could do my homework, I could do my paperwork from work, I could drink coffee, I could even take a nap while my car takes me from point A to point B. So what bothers me a little bit about the concept is we're not, as regular individuals outside of the processing and the engineering department, we're looking at it, how can these vehicles, these self-driving vehicles, benefit me? How are they going to make my life better? What is the allure about them? Well, the allure is comfort. The allure is taking the responsibility of operating your vehicle safely away from you and putting it into the hands of the computers. However, I present to you some of the scenarios that were not thought about. The first thing that comes to mind with computers is, no matter how great their computing power is, computers stand a chance of being corrupted. Can the programs survive corruption? Number two, if we're talking about a vehicle that operates solely on the programming of its onboard computer system, then can that system be hacked? Can it be interfered with? Will the system suffer viruses? Will the system crash at the wrong time? Now let's talk about the economics of a self-driving vehicle. Yes, the allure of owning one is great to think about, but suppose there is a mechanical or a computer problem. Do we have the infrastructure, or will the infrastructure of mechanical parts or computerized parts, instead of taking our car to a garage, will we have to take it to some type of computerized installation to have our car reprogrammed? With self-driving cars, there has not, in my opinion, been enough investigation into some of the inherent problems that can occur with it. In the testing phase, for example, self-driving cars are always tested on perfectly smooth, straight tracks. They're always tested in very good weather. But that makes really no sense, because every driver who's ever operated an automobile knows that they have to drive in rainstorms and snowstorms, when there's frozen rain, when there's sleet on the road. How will self-driving cars react under these type of conditions? Another thing about self-driving cars that I don't think the developers are taking into account is, as a human driver, I can make humane, moral decisions. A self-driving car is not a human. It is not bound by humane decision making. Well, let me give you an example of how that works. Let's say in this scenario, for example, a self-driving car is going down a street where the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. And suddenly there is a pothole in the road that wasn't there before. Now, of course, the car will detect the pothole. But let's say, for example, as soon as it detects the pothole, a young child darts out into the street right between the car and the pothole. Now, its onboard computing has already detected a pothole and made allowances to slow the car down or swerve out of the way. But that child is an unknown circumstance that happened quickly. Will the car be able to stop in time? Or if it stops or swerves, does it swerve into a wall that's next to it, or does it swerve into the child? These are unanswered questions about self-driving cars that must be addressed. As I summarize this, self-driving cars are a product of our fantasy of science fiction that has today become scientific fact. My concern about the self-driving car is not so much of the innovative technology, not so much of the progress we're making, but as flawed human beings, are we prepared to take on the responsibility that this type of technology will present itself? Thank you very much for listening. Have a very blessed day.